All right, hey, welcome everyone to the inaugural Tortuga Society Book Club. This is session number 3. We are finishing up chapters 3 and 4 of Pillars of Earth. I don't have too much prepared today just because I've been busy with travel and other things, but of course I always have things to talk about. But eager to get first impressions on how finishing up this first section was, just general impressions, thoughts, difficulties, anything like that.
I really liked it a lot. I was it's been a while since I've read a book, and so this has been exciting because it is very like I've had a little bit of trouble even predicting what's going to happen, how it's going to build. It yeah, maybe it's just me, but I feel like the story is kind of a little bit unpredictable, but it logically makes sense, the chain of events and everything, and very believable. I also really liked how he described how they took over the fort. I
Mm-hmm.
forget in which section. That was a sick part. I didn't think you'd be able to make that super exciting in a book, but it was generally really exciting, especially with the multiple viewpoints and everything. It's a good editing and cut there.
Yeah.
A lot happened, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely a step up in terms of events occurring, and I can kind of see how this is coalescing into. I can see where you are saying this is things have not quite developed yet, and there's a lot more of the essence of the book that's going to be coming as we move forward. I can see how things are kind of coalescing and where we're kind of going in terms of the story. So yeah, I think the setup is kind of more or less been formulated in this particular section.
Yeah. So I think the reason I wanted to get to the end of this section is I think so I have this set of notes here. Also, let me change it. If you guys want to edit it, you can add stuff to it as well. For me, like so the way I would say is like like the first maybe chapter, including the prologue, we focused a lot on like thematically like the life of a workman and his family and taking care of his family, and there was a lot of sensory details associated with that, just in terms of both the architecture but also just an imagination, but also just the life of like, walking and taking your pig across the land and dealing with people. And then of course chapter 2 is all about Philip and like the church and the hierarchy and like these interesting contemplative things about like morality and stuff like this. But then these chapters 3 and 4, there's really leads into like, I really like what you said, Roland Barnacle, about the multiple vantage points, because that's really important in terms of it focuses heavily on interpersonal dynamics.
Mm.
And so you have a lot of different characters who are involved in a lot of different things, and you see, for example, like, Jack not knowing that he has a father, and that he comes from a father, is like a type of socialization that's happening between a lot of different people who may not generally encounter each other all the time, and sort of the foibles and the follies and the humorous parts, but also the hostilities. And then besides that, yeah, I think like the big thing is like this major like military campaign, which is waged, and everything that's crazy inside of that, and how that's going to have ramifications for later. So out of the three things that I said, like the workmen and the sensory details, all of this still bleeds in, and then also like the morality in the church, and then a lot of these like interpersonal dynamics. Like, how do you think these two chapters compare to like the previous setup? Like, do you feel like they like, what sort of things do you think are being set up? Like, what things are being completed? What questions are being opened up now that we basically at this point have the full cast of characters?
Mm.
So there's, Tom and his family, Ellen, when you're a kid, the church people and the cast of those, and then now, of course, William and the larger Hamley family, and then Alina and Richard, and these kind of form the backbone. I don't really know if I asked a question, but feel free to share your thoughts on like what this setup looked like or anything like that.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the events obviously set everything up. I feel like we've sort of set up prior to being part of kind of like a Game of Thrones type of story that he's kind of actively almost trying to avoid, and seems like, but he's going to get pulled into it, and he's going to have to kind of deal with it just to maintain his sort of, I guess, attempt at trying to influence the world towards God. Tom is gonna, I think, probably have to run into more instances of figuring out what he's gonna have to sacrifice to get this cathedral built. So that's a consistency theme, I think, throughout, with all the comments from Agnes and different people. So I think that's probably going to be something that's going to be a stressor eventually. Jack, I think, is a fun wild card that I wasn't expecting to like after the first chapter or two. But I mean, we spent so much time with him that I'm curious to see how that goes. I'm willing to bet that him and Martha become a thing eventually by some point in the story. Just a guess. I'll also take money on Alfred doing something stupid and maiming himself at some point, or maybe that's just a hope. I don't know. Yeah,
people doing something stupid in this storyline.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, no. Probably my other favorite character is the new bishop. I really like him a lot. I enjoy Littlefinger from Game of Thrones, so I like that he kind of has a small bit of morality, but is also just maxing out the power game pretty strongly. I like that a lot.
Yeah, what do you like about, or like, can you say more? That's really.
Oh yeah. I like the fact that he seems to have, like, it almost is like he's trying to sort of separate this sort of like spiritual side that he kind of, I think, does have. Where he does interact with the church. He does seem to obviously have some fear, like obviously at the end of the chapter with Ellen, where she sings the song and then dips like like she's some fairy tale villain, and he just absolutely is just like freaking out about that. He kind of obviously does have like this spiritual sort of fear, but especially with that first meeting with Pryor, with the Prior, he seems like he was obviously playing a larger game, but there did seem to be some care. Maybe I'm just taking the Prior's internal monologue a little too literally, or not questioning it as much, but I don't know. There just seems to be a little more to him than just like a Littlefinger type character to me, or maybe I'm hoping a bit. Did that answer the question?
Oh yeah, totally. The way I would like to respond, which I think is really great, is it's so like I obviously have my strong opinions, and I do think there are certain ways in which Ken Follett is trying to like map out who's like generally, let's say, like more on the good side and more who is on the evil side, but he still maintains that sort of like ambiguity. Unlike most modern literature, that like clearly tries to delineate like a very simplistic line between like good and evil. You can look at someone like Bishop Walleran, who, maybe I'm biased because, I know later in the book, but I don't like him as much. But when you say like he's maxing out his power game, that's a true statement. I mean, there's a sort of strength behind that, and I think Ken Follett is trying to do a good job like demonstrating what that looks like. And so yeah, that's thank you for sharing. That's really awesome. Yeah, other thoughts on like the character, any predictions, any on character like development, things like that, and then also we can start slipping into other themes.
Tom, things it's a little difficult to see in this story because it is so relatively regional as compared to Game of Thrones or for some of the more wide-spanning arcs is that it's difficult to see what these machinations are actually getting. For instance, Bishop Balaram, right? Like, what is he trying to do other than, well, clearly he's trying to grasp at power, but I'm not actually clear what he wants out of this power. For instance, right? I mean,
Okay.
Clearly there are some folks out there who want more, but what does that more get them? And I'm not really clear, right? I mean, I'm not really clear what the Hemley family are getting out of it, other than, just a better position in life. Which, I mean, to be fair, I guess everybody wants that, but you know, I
Well,
it's
revenge
it's
for them
a
a little bit.
little vague to me. What does an earl have that that a baron doesn't, other than a little more accolade.
Hmm.
Well, revenge is one of the big motivating factors in that particular episode.
Yeah. There's a big theme
Totally
of
fair.
humiliation throughout these last couple chapters with William, and then you obviously have it with Jack when messing with Alfred. Tom, again, just feeling humiliated and not having a job. I don't. Maybe there was some points with the prior. There was a little bit of that when he was getting elected, but
I mean, Tom's motivation for most of these chapters has been, I'm fucking starving. not to put too fine a point on it, but he's like, hey, I lost my
Okay.
pig. I'm going to die.
Yeah, touche.
I can't remember whether maybe this is. I don't want to go because I have something to say to that, but yeah, it's interesting, Bobby, because I feel like this is a question that is actually pretty common. Like, people are like, I want more power, but they don't actually interrogate. And I'm like victim to this too. Like, I'm someone who, just because of my social skills, like, there's a certain amount in the social arena that I can do to accumulate power, but oftentimes I'll get it and then I won't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you look at even like a lot of like our intellectual pundit class, they are like seeking a lot of influence and power over like discourse and who listens to them and like norms of society. And some of them like twist themselves into ridiculous pretzels to accomplish that goal, which is not exactly happening. Like, it's much more straightforward in this case, in this book, but it's still like, what's the goal here? What are you trying to? Because it's clear for someone like Philip and Tom, like, oh, I want to do something glorious.
Sure.
That's why I want power. Is there any part of that sort of like power maxing for the sake of it that you guys relate to? Like, hey, can you think of instances where like you've known people who do that?
What? Oh, I ask that of people all the time in the real world, right? If when we're talking to people who have relatively speaking made it on the wealth side of things, right? Where I said, look, you have $50 billion. What do you want with more money? What would you do if you were a billionaire instead? Why? How would that change your life? What would you do if you had $10 billion? How would that change your life? And most of the time, people sort of stammer, and they're like, "Oh, well, it would be better."
Yeah, I think that's yeah. That's even a hard question for me
The
to
answer is, it probably wouldn't be better. You haven't thought that through. You acquire a whole new set of problems. Go think about that for a couple days, and
Yeah.
then you might actually decide you don't want that set of problems.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a total distraction, and I won't just disturb this particular discussion with it. But
Theon, you've been characteristically quiet.
Characteristically or uncharacteristically?
Uncharacteristically.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no,
muted.
yeah, sorry. Yeah. Just been very busy lately, and my mind's in a lot of places. But I do have a lot of thoughts about this particular section. One thing is, I think we're getting an interesting sort of setup that shows a certain level of the constellation of things happening. And I think we've dabbled a little bit in it so far, and my prediction for the rest of the novel is that, and so far Ken Follett has done a good job of this, of showing how some of these political machinations can have downstream effects and how that affects these different parties in various ways. And there's sort of a proximity effect too, where someone like Tom is affected in that him and his family face danger temporarily as being part of the Earl, being with the Earl when the attack happens, with the Earl and his daughter directly, right, potentially facing consequences. We